I made this cool vintage wagon in Blender, but most old wagons had covers, so I made one with a cloth simulation. I'll show you how I did it. First I figured out the rough measurements for the cover. I measured a hoop to get the width, and I measured the wagon box to get the length. I adjusted those initial dimensions to taste, and using the revised measurements, I created a plane, which I then subdivided to a point that I felt would give me the detail needed for a cloth simulation. I ended up doing one more subdivision later. Wagon covers were often attached to wagons with rope at tie points, like a tarp, so I wanted to be able to manipulate the cloth at these points somehow when simulated. For this I used an armature. I added control bones at the key points along the cloth for each tie down. With this setup, I'd be able to pull the cloth simulation around by animating the bones. Covers were often cinched with string at either end of a wagon. To mimic this effect in Blender, I used cloth sewing. But for that to work, you need something for the cloth to sew too. For this, I created these temporary horseshoe shapes that I placed in the front and back of the cover for the edges to cinch to when the sewing was enabled. Each of these shapes also got a bone added so I could move them. Once I had the bones properly influencing the mesh, I had one final step to the cloth setup, which was to prepare the fabric for cinching to the horseshoe shapes that I made earlier. To do this, I connected the front and back of the cloth to these shapes with edges, which serve as guides telling Blender where it should sew cloth together. The idea here is that after the simulation, I can delete these shapes and it should look like the cloth is simply cinched with string. With the cloth setup finished, there's one final, exhausting thing to do, which is to create some simplified wagon mesh for the cloth to interact with. Cloth will simply pass through any mesh that isn't specified as collision geometry, and it's a best practice to make sure this geo is as simple as possible. So here I am making some super simple wagon box mesh for the cloth to wrap around. With that finished, I finally add a cloth effect to the cloth mesh I've prepared. There was a lot of trial and error and testing here to land on settings that work the way I wanted them to, but eventually I got there. As you can see, when I run the simulation, the cloth is held in place by the bones, and the front and rear edges are attracted to the sewing shapes I made earlier. By animating the bones, I'm able to wrap the cover into place around the wagon collision geometry. After a little cleanup work and some texturing, I was happy with the result and added the cover to my wagon.